Well, we've been asked for some more information and illustration of the use of snap and grid, and if you look down on the status line here, both snap and grid are on, and I'm drawing at the moment in red. I'll right click and look at drafting settings, and I'm working with a grid of 200mm both X and Y and a bold step every 2. And let me illustrate what that means. It means that if I take the line command, it means because snap's on, I can click here and move away, and I jump 400mm at a time, or 200mm, so I've now gone 800mm in the right halfway, 1000mm, and now 1200, and so on. So I can design on a grid, and a lot of people find that useful to do. There are designers who will have a relatively narrow grid closer to a building and then set up a bigger grid as you move away from the building to get a better sense of scale and perspective. But if I move to a layout that's called Landscape Plan A3, let me zoom extents here and right click and go to drafting settings. Here I've got a grid and a snap of 5mm and X and Y step of 2. What that means, in other words, a different grid is operating in model space versus paper space. You can use this sort of system to, for the sake of argument, I've drawn a floating viewport here. I can just, because the grid is on, I can pan down a little, I can just pick up the corner of the floating viewport and click, and it's now located. And if we look in the properties box, bottom left is 5mm from the right, 5mm up, top right 410. So you can control things very easily using this system. It helps considerably when you want to set up another viewport. Let's imagine that I want another viewport sitting across here, perhaps to pick up a plant schedule. I can right click and add a viewport. So if I pop the viewport in, can you see it's clicking and locking into position? So that particular viewport is drawn with the current colour, which I've left it red to distinguish it from the previous colour, magenta. So if I select that viewport, it's going to have the borders of the viewport whole numbers, top and bottom. Width left is 25, bottom is 15, and X and Y values for the top right are there. So it can help to use the grid and snap, but what was confusing one of our users is, why are the values different? Well, one, in model space, it's convenient for me to work with a 200mm grid, and in landscape space work with a much smaller grid because I'm laying things out here on an A3 page. So I hope that helps our user a little.